Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Last Friday in Istanbul, Iran met face-to-face with the E3, France, Germany and the UK for their first nuclear discussions since the recent US and Israeli attacks. While the talks were described as open and thorough, they ended without any significant progress. Now, with the E3 threatening UN snapback sanctions by August end, tensions rise. Iran warns of serious consequences if sanctions return, while Europe navigates pressure from the US alongside its own interests. Now, as focus sharpens on Iran, questions arise about how the E3's stance might affect the broader regional balance and even influence Russia's strategic moves amid the ongoing Ukraine conflict. Now, to analyze it all and what it means, we're joined by Krzysztof Jaworski, Director of International Affairs, Institute for Security and International Development. Thanks so much for joining us here this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Krzysztof, there's a lot at play here. On the one hand, I want to ask about the balance between the E3 vis-a-vis Iran, and that policy is also shifting and changing. But at the same time now, looking at how these three countries in that joint statement just very recently, within the last sort of 24 hours, about ending that war in Gaza, pushing for a ceasefire. How do these things collide, and what does this ultimately mean also for Ukraine?
In my opinion, it wouldn't mean significant change when it comes to attention and focus of European countries on Ukrainian war and support for Ukraine. We have to have in mind that when it comes to Gaza, it's mainly about humanitarian aid, and the scale of this crisis and required sources that should be put into helping stopping this humanitarian crisis are significantly smaller than the sources, than the money and the cost of supporting Ukraine. So in my opinion, it wouldn't mean that for countries like United Kingdom, like France, like Germany, it will be hard to have significant sources to support Ukraine, even if they will allocate some of their money into supporting stopping humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. But it's more than just the humanitarian crisis, isn't it? I mean, this is also something now with Macron saying he's recognized the state of Palestine. I mean, he's going to be announcing that at the United Nations General Assembly in September. Germany, as well as stalwart ally of Israel, has also slowly seems to be changing its tune as well. I mean, there's also weapons shipments from the UK, from Germany to Israel. So will this not in some way potentially have, let's say, become more under scrutiny if this policy changes?
I think that the moment when this scrutiny of and this scarcity of military resources entered the strategic calculation in this matter was when Hamas attacked Israel, and some of these military resources were rerouted from Ukraine to Israel. However, now after more than 1 year, I think that we can assume that it wasn't a critical blow for the efficiency of support for Ukraine. Of course, a lot happened since this attack, and mainly it was tense discussions when it comes to bilateral relations between Ukraine and United States. However, I think that now we are not facing some danger of significant change when it comes to a level of support for Ukraine, and even we can have some optimistic views, having in mind that Trump administration is now changing its approach towards Russia as well. Of course, it's too early to build on this recent announcements too much of a forecast when it comes to this approach of US towards Russia. However, I think we are going toward better than it used to be at the beginning of Trump's second presidency term.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, I mean, we've seen also with the U.S. strikes on Iran, I mean, that took significant resources as well. The United States showed us once again it is a significant military power in this world. If we have something like that, I mean, obviously this is now at a point where there's no military conflict, but having that as a danger potentially, will that not draw America more focused on the Middle East and to Asia and away from Ukraine, putting more pressure on Europe to provide aid and also military aid to Ukraine?
Yes, I think it's we should look at this as interconnected operational filters, and priority for US is its rivalry with China and South China Sea. So China is the only peer competitor that could well be possibly danger for position of United States in the whole world. So US is in this longer term redirecting its military resources from Europe and from Middle East toward countering China and toward its presence in South China Sea. When it comes to Middle East, of course, some of these military resources of US and strategic attention of US is as well shifted toward Middle East due to very active now politics of Israel and well recent exchange of strikes with Iran and direct intervention of United States. From our point of view, it's good that it stopped after this several strikes from US, because if US will be engaged much more there, it will be really hard for them to have enough military resources and enough attention to support Ukraine, because Iran could be something like Afghanistan for the Soviet Union, because it's a vast country with huge demography, with specific geography. It's really hard to conquer them or to significantly win over them. And as we've seen already, there were some support from China toward Iran, because if there will be war in the Middle East, for China it will be a great strategic opportunity to drain resources of their main competitor, of the United States. So of course we need to have in mind all of these things. However, as for now, this support for Ukraine, as I mentioned earlier, is on the level that is enough for Ukraine to keep Russian advances really slow, because of course we can see that Russia is advancing territorially by several kilometers each month. However, they are making it on the cost of huge losses. Over 100,000 soldiers, Russian soldiers, died already in 2025. And of course, for Ukraine now, the most important thing is not to retake territory or to stop all territorial advancements of Russia, but to defend its state, to defend its well ability to be sovereign and ability to rebuild after the war is end.
Mm-hmm. Let's also talk about Russia there in more of a, let's say, specific context. I mean, it's no secret that Russia has been using more and more drones, their own production, but also significantly Shahed drones made in Iran have been a consistent part of the arsenal as we've seen terrible strikes on Ukrainian cities and infrastructure. I mean, as the E3 especially move more in terms of what seems to be a kind of more alignment with the United States, are there any more resources, or let's say, does this push Iran even further closer to Russia? I mean, is it already close enough, or can we expect any kind of, let's say, closer strategic ties now because of what's happened in the last sort of few weeks?
So when it comes to cooperation, military cooperation between Iran and Russia, as for now, Russia already have its own production of Shahed drones, which they at first bought from Iran. And when it comes to this cooperation, it used to be that Russia paid for this support, as well as Iran in this exchange get our money or other kind of military know-how or support. So I think it's not changing significantly this strategic calculation, this cooperation between Russia and Iran, even if it will be closer than it is now. And as well, Iran is now significantly weaker because this several days of Israeli attacks during the war between these countries was a disaster for Iran military. They lost most of their military systems, and as well when it comes to Russia, And this dronization you mentioned, Russia is trying to significantly weaken the energetic system of Ukraine and to put a lot of costs and heart on Ukrainian society. However, at the same time, Ukraine is already having more and more its own capabilities to strike deep into Russian territory. So it's not so one-sided that it used to be. Even if this recent attacks on Ukraine were really huge, having in mind the fact that it was more than 400 drones and missiles each attack.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also on air defense where Ukraine really needs more help significantly. I think that's definitely what we'll have to see more of. But also, you mentioned earlier China and all this, and I'm curious to see that aspect of this whole. I mean, it's also known that China's had some very close relations with Iran and also with Russia. I remember some weeks back, or maybe more than a month ago now, there was also levels on nuclear discussions back in Beijing. So what is China's role in all this, and how significant is that, let's say, entrenchment in relations between Beijing and Tehran?
Yes, so I would say that China is the beginning of all this disruption in the world now, because we used to live in this unipolar moment when where US had all the power and all the tools to stabilize each part of world if only they wanted to. However, now this balance of power between China and US is peer competition, and it gives this window of opportunity for revisionist states like Iran, like Russia, to try to rearrange the regional balance of power in their favor, especially Russia, which is actively disrupting and trying to conquer Ukraine and then put pressure further on our region and further on Europe, and to be part of this deciding about this part of the world. And I think that China is playing this game safe as for now, because of course they are to some degree supporting Russia, to some degree supporting Iran, but it's not all-in engagement. It's at the same time sometimes lowered by the potential sanctions on Chinese economic entities. So I think for China it is useful in some ways, because on the one hand they are helping Russia to make their goals of rearrangement of global order more possible to achieve by them, but at the same time this war is draining Russia of its resources, of its military power, and making Russia more and more dependent on China. So in this cooperation, Russia is a junior partner of China, and for China it's really useful because they can achieve lower costs of importing energy from Russia, for example, and at the same time they are expanding their presence and their interests in Central Asia, where Russia used to be a really important player.
Right. So, as we know, the intricacies of all the geopolitics are immense and very deep indeed. But as we said, the E3, that was the focus. And thanks so much for giving us all your insights there, Krzysztof Jaworski. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching World Talks. Stay tuned. Much more coming up right here on TVP World. Goodbye.